And so this being is a representation, and the underworld is a representation of many things that can consume you in a negative fashion. No-Face is the embodiment of loneliness.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot. I'm your host, as always, Maverick, bringing you the podcast by storytellers for storytellers so that we can tell better stories ourselves. Today, we have our guest back with us for another round, Chad Garrett, talking together about the Studio Ghibli classic, Spirited Away. Now, Chad, when you're thinking about this film, just right off the bat, what do you love about it? What do you hate about it? What really comes to mind when you think of this film?
Dragons is like number one. Like the whole reason I first watched this movie ever was the fact that I saw a clip of this dragon and he was bleeding all over the place. And I was like, what is happening? Turns out that like the movie is like not about that at all. Like that is such a tiny part of what this movie is about. Oh, to my surprise, when I first started watching it. The thing that I do love about it, and this is as we continue to do like more of these hosted podcasts and stuff like that, where you bring me on as a guest, you'll realize that I have certain themes and just speak loudly to me across all platforms.
Yeah.
And so, in the same way that when we were talking about Kingdom of Heaven, one of the, like being a knight was a big thing. In this one, there's some similar motifs that are important to the story that share a parallel with Kingdom of Heaven, and the number one of that is courage. The quintessential element of this, the main theme, without going too far into it right now, is a girl's journey in becoming courageous. And that, whenever you boil it down to that core element, that speaks to me on a spiritual level, even as a dude. So I can watch this 9-year-old girl go through the spirit world all day long and be totally satisfied, because there's not just a motif, but like a full-on through line. Like the entire main hook of this thing is, from the first moment, what is the journey to becoming brave and courageous, and what are the repercussions if you don't?
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a little bit of a throwback to me, because I haven't watched a Studio Ghibli film since college with some of my buddies who first introduced me to the genre. It's really interesting. The biggest thing that struck me was, holy crap, this is a kid's movie? Because there was multiple times where I was like, this got real dark real fast. And I can't believe that this is catered to the kids section of the film categories. Like, that's just insane.
That has everything to do, for me, and from what I understand, as like major differences between major cultural differences between what we are like raised up to expect in Western society versus what the East is raised up to expect in their storytelling. So it's no different. Like there are even certain cultural differences in storytelling. This is a bit of a tangent, but between the United States, and which was largely founded originally by Puritans, and then Europe, right? Europe has a significantly longer history of art than what we have here in the United States, and has a much higher tolerance for nudity and sexual imagery. Right. Just nudity and sex overall in their artwork, whether it be still or video or whatever. They have a much higher tolerance for that in Europe than we do in the States. And I think that that's largely due to religious morality that's been handed down in the cultural artistic sphere here, due to the Puritan influences and the other Protestant influences that came here. Similar things happen between the West overall and the East, and the closest thing that you get kind of to what they do in Japan as far as like exposing their kids to certain things at a younger age, or being willing to expose them to certain things at a younger age, is like the Brothers Grimm in Germany. So Germanic tales were very dark, very bloody,
Yeah.
intended to scare children, right? Like the idea was, we are going to make an impact through fear. I think that there's an element of that macabre that still exists in Japanese culture. I think that not only does Eastern culture, and this is another odd thing, I think that Eastern culture has more tolerance for violence even than what we do in the West. Now, I would, if you were going to ask me to back that up, I would argue that it's due to specifically Christian influences that cause that, because of the message of Christ trying to be this idea of peace and love, and turn the other cheek, and love thy neighbor, and everything like that. And so when you take that to the nth degree, I think that naturally tries to, like, top down parental figures, community leaders and stuff like that. They try and dissuade at least the romanticization of violence, that I don't think that Eastern culture, specifically Japan, I don't think that they have that.
Okay. I see. Yeah.
But also there's an entire part, we were talking a little bit beforehand about the Shinto faith and everything, and there's a very large portion of the Shinto faith that deals with very dark and macabre things. And that's what we get into, like you were talking about with this film. It's like, it gets like, it goes from being like, all right, this is a little bit weird, but like there's nothing going on, to he just ate what?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And it's very, like, interesting to see like the personification of the spirit realm in this film, and like what that looks like, and all the almost implications of what that should look like, or like how they interact with each other and things like that. Very, very interesting. So, but we might as well get right into the meat of it now. For you who have been listening so far but are like, what is this about? Let's get a brief summary on this and our ratings, and then get right into the podcast. So, Chad, what is Spirited Away about?
A girl is moving to a new town, gets lost into the spirit world with her parents, and then has to, and without giving away too much at the very beginning of this, has to find a way to, in the order of magnitude, she gets lost in the spirit realm, loses her parents, and then has to fight for survival against a bunch of spirits that want to do her harm. And then, in reverse order, solves every one of those things. So you have the survival element that kicks in basically immediately after the inciting incident, which turns into a longer journey of survival, the whole time developing courage, which then turns into finding the parents at the climactic moment, and then returning home in the denouement. So if you're looking for it, like, little cowardly girl gets lost into the spirit world, discovers courage, and also discovers spiritual maturity, and then makes her way back home into the real world.
Nice. Yeah, that's pretty much the film. With,
you don't have to watch the movie anymore. Like, I just told you.
Exactly.
Just kidding.
There you go. No, it's pretty good. I mean, on the 9-point system, I gave it a 6.9.
I gave it a 7.3.
Yeah, see, there you go.
Yep.
That's that for me is like a would rewatch this, would enjoy this. Definitely if someone has it on, I'm sitting down and watching it, kind of thing. Yep. It's not like top dog best movie I've ever seen, but it's a great movie. It's a solid movie. Yeah, definitely worth.
From a narrative perspective, one of the reasons why people jump so hard at this film is because it's gorgeous. Right. It's really pretty. Even from an anime perspective, it's animated differently than what you come to expect from your typical anime. There's richer detail. There's more attention to detail made, and that's evident from the opening moments of the film. So a lot of times when people come to a Studio Ghibli movie, they're not really coming for the story. They're coming for the animation style, right? They're coming because they want to look at something pretty.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, there's a little bit wrong with that. I have my problems with movies that have no story. This has enough story with the pretty for it to be satisfied, right? This isn't like the Green Knight that A24 did that about made me want to like throw something. I was so angry. That's like my favorite. It's my favorite epic poem right now. Like that and the Song of Roland. So anyway, besides the point. However, there's a cultural element to this that's interesting to me, is that Spirited Away is not the best narrative that Studio Ghibli has. I have at least 2 films that I rank narratively higher than I do Spirited Away from Studio Ghibli, right? The first one's Princess Mononoke, and the second one is Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind, right? So Princess Mononoke was like my favorite anime movie as a young boy, and then growing up I realized that due to some of the English mistranslations, it's actually not as solid in the narrative realm as I thought it was. It's also really slow at some points. Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind is the best narrative that Miyazaki senpai has ever made. It's the best one he's ever written. So if you watch Spirited Away and you enjoy it, go watch Nausicaa, because you'll be blown away at the narrative quality. And it happened the whole like almost 10 years before we got Spirited Away.
Okay, so let me just... Okay, that's so funny. So we'll have to review Princess Mononoke at some point on here. We'll not get too far gone on this. I just want to tell you, my first introduction to anime was Princess Mononoke. And I was so weirded out by the film that I was like, I never want to watch anime again in my life. And of course, slowly it got re-enculturated into the genre, and I saw some legitimately awesome things. So I haven't seen it since then. I really should, because I do recall certain things being really interesting about the plot line. But when, little spoiler alert, when they put the deer head in the jug and start carrying it chased by random stuff, that was just like way too much for my very Western brain to comprehend at the time. And I was like, this is too much. I can't do this. So
I had never seen anything like Princess Mononoke. And we're not here to talk about that, but I had never seen anything like that. And then I got to the part where Princess Mononoke is like sucking the bad blood out of the side of the wolf's neck, trying to get at the bullet that's in the wolf. And I'm like, so here's this like by anime standards, hot girl, right? To my young brain, just like face smeared with blood after like, I'm like, what is happening?
How is this in a movie?
Oh my God. At that moment, I was like, I'm hooked. I have to see how this ends. And it's forever been one of those quintessential moments, man. Where yours, it was like, I am never into anime. I'm like, I am hooked.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh, dude. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was just...
That's all you need to make a good movie is you need a hot girl performing really rudimentary medical practices on a wolf, and you've got a great anime flick, guys.
They have, and they definitely in that one as well have some very strong cultural references that you see, like in this one with the Shinto stuff and the because this whole movie is about the spirit realm and an understanding of, to some degree, that, which I should have better before recording this, but whatever. An understanding of that plays into the story as a whole and what all is going on there. So definitely a whole different world if you're a Western viewer and are not familiar with that. But very good. So anyways.
And that's one of the things that we were chatting about right before we started rolling and such, is that there's an element of the Shinto faith where it is known, if I am not mistaken, as there's a saying in Japanese. I don't know the saying, but it basically means the religion of a million faces,
Right.
because everything in the Shinto faith has a spirit. Everything has a spirit, and so you see that manifested to a small degree in this film. In the closest thing that we kind of have in the West, the closest like understanding to it is like naturalism, where it's like, okay, that tree is alive, that tree is a being, that tree is its own entity. Whereas the Shinto faith takes it a little bit further, where it says that tree has a soul, and in the spirit realm, that tree can manifest as whatever, right? Oftentimes, really powerful forces end up manifesting themselves as things like dragons, right? And this is specifically water spirits. And we encounter in this film 2 different water spirits that manifest themselves as dragons that play a quintessential role in this. And part of that is due to the movement and the design of these dragons, right? How in the Eastern culture, they have the very long bodies and they look wavy and stuff. If you look at topographical maps, or if you were to draw a map of a river or a stream, it looks like these dragons flying, like they're almost slithering serpentine through the air. And that's believed to be one of potentially the cultural origins of these things, if you believe that they don't actually exist. I keep my mind open to all things. I'm sort of a belief agnostic when it comes to that stuff. Like, it could have been real. Sure. It also could have been the human imagination, because we come up with some crazy stuff. I'm open to everything. Like in that realm, especially when it comes to dragons, like I want to believe so bad. Me with dragons is Joe Rogan with aliens. Like I want to believe so bad in dragons.
That's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Dude, that's so good. Oh man, I just remembered being in like middle school giving speeches about dragons, because I was so fascinated by all the different types and stuff. And I don't even know if they're real, but it's like, I don't care. I'm giving a speech on this. So that's amazing.
I used to have those old like dragonology books.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Dude, when How to Train Your Dragon came out, you're like, let's go.
So, personal tangent. 2025 for my anniversary. If anybody wants to stalk me, you can totally catch me and my wife celebrating our anniversary at Universal's Epic Universe, because the island of Bork is totally happening.
Let's go.
In Orlando, Florida, at Universal's new park, which is this larger than the combined size of their 2 existing parks and the City Walk area. It is larger than that. Has not only Nintendo World in it, but also the island of Bork.
That is awesome. And that is actually awesome.
Yeah. And so that's my wife and I got engaged there at Universal Studios at the foot of Hogwarts. My wife and I honeymooned there when we got married a year later. It's just one of our favorite places, and so we're taking this year off from going for our anniversary, so that we can like let the park open in 2025, and then we're going to go back and experience the island of Bork. If anybody wants to experience it, I love How to Train Your Dragon. I thought it was such a unique and fun thought experiment into the idea of dragons, because you're usually
oh for sure. We don't want to we don't want to too much out there.
Well, dragons are usually either a plot device, or they are they're either a protagonistic plot device, i.e. Aragon, right? There's really like Saphira and the Dragon is a means to an end. It has some bearing on the story. Or they're antagonistic, where they're the main villain or a main villain. And that's the stories, especially in Western culture, that go all the way back. We actually, the dragons are our friends premise, to wrap it back into things like Spirited Away, comes from Eastern culture, right? This is one of those things that we owe Asians for. Asians are awesome because they made dragons our friends. Without the Asian influence, you don't get How to Train Your Dragon, and therefore you can see this reflected in Spirited Away, because one of the core things that allows Chihiro, which is our main protagonist, one of the main things that allows her to find her courage is that the manifestation of a water spirit that manifests as both a boy and a dragon in this film. So he's in a way like a changeling in that kind of facet. Buys her the time that she needs to discover her own courage. When she initially gets lost in that, and that's your inciting incident, right? So her and her family, they kind of wander into this place, and we don't know what this place is, and the lights start going down, and she walks away from her mom and dad because they're too busy eating a bunch of food. And then all of a sudden, crap starts popping up out of nowhere, specifically this young boy. He's like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Go away.
Yep.
And she tries to go and find her parents, and her parents that was the first moment of, oh crap, because the moment where she finds her parents and discovers what her parents have turned into is like H.P. Lovecraft in Rats in the Walls, man. Like, it's that moment of like, whoa, like we went there.
Yeah. You get the impression that like something is going to happen to them as soon as they're eating the food, right? But you don't know what. And so when you see them turn full on into pigs, almost representing their piggishness and how they're eating the food, right? It goes into a very, I think from that point on, it's pretty dark. Like if you're a kid and you're watching, the adults just turned into animals that are being put in a pen to be slaughtered. Like that's a crazy premise just to like push the protagonist into the story and say, let's go.
Yep. And then you throw her down a set of steps into the hands of a literal Spider-Man, not like cool Spider-Man, but like a
creepy
spider dude spirit guy who's awesome, by the way. We love Kamachi. Kamachi is awesome. But
you don't know that when you first meet him.
Dude, the first time you see him, you're like, who are you? Can we leave now? Like they do such a good job because they take when you first meet Chihiro and she's driving in the car and everything is mundane, you're like, oh my god, this chick is so annoying.
Yeah.
And then crap starts going down and you're like, I'm with her. Let's get out of here.
Yeah. Well, and that's you literally see that in that first interaction with I forget the spider guy's name, but
Kamachi.
So Kamachi and Chihiro, because Chihiro has almost like and I love this so much about the movie, is that Chihiro's supposed to be like 10 years old, right? She's a kid. She doesn't know how to interact in a human world, let alone a spirit world. And so her almost every interaction she has at first is very, I don't want to be here, I'm scared, or something along those lines, and she's pulling back. And then when she recognizes that she needs to engage, she goes completely the other way and becomes just very stubborn and goes, I need this, I need this, I need this. And just starts repeating herself until she can get what she wants. And it's very, like, she stays in that child mentality. They don't take a child, pretend they're an adult, and then make the adult be the protagonist of the story. They take a child, keep the child a child, and then grow the child throughout the story. So it was, and you see that right from the beginning where she's interacting with this spider guy, and she's like, I don't know what to do. I'm freaked out, but I was told if I don't get a job from this guy, I am going to die. So give me a job, give me a job, give me a job.
Yeah. And then you also see, in the same way that Chihiro is the child, but exercises in the very beginning an element of caution that we can identify with, except because she's so annoying about it, we don't want to listen to her. Is this very interesting triumvirate of feelings that they torque out of you. Meanwhile, it's immediately conversed by her parents, who, in one degree, you understand why they're acting as boorish as they are, right? And I call it boorish because if you've ever seen a boar like rampaging through the woods, it doesn't give a crap about anything in its way, which I think is also indicative as to why they turn them into pigs. Besides just their gluttonous, but their entire personality up until that point is like I said, it's boorish. Like it's just doze on ahead. We're not going to worry about what's in our way. But that comes with the idea that like we're grown, we don't believe in any of this stuff. We don't think that there's anything to be afraid of because we've lived so much life and never encountered anything. And so this is just like, oh, okay, whatever. We're just gonna go do our thing, right? Even whenever they come across the suspicious food, they're like, oh, cool, abandoned park, but somebody's here cooking. Dope. Like, let me just jump into this. Anybody in their right mind is just gonna be like, no.
Yeah.
Which is what Chihiro does. But up until that point, she was really annoying. Even in that moment, she's kind of really annoying. And so we kind of want to root for the parents, even though we know that the parents are doing something that is a childish, reckless abandon, but coming from a place of perceived maturity. So what you're seeing is mental maturity, but spiritual immaturity.
Mm-hmm.
What you're seeing in Chihiro at that point is spiritual maturity from the very outset of the film, while lacking in mental maturity as well as lacking in courage in sort of ethical maturity, if you want to call it that.
Right. That's an interesting point, because one thing you can definitely tell if you're watching this film is that the two things. One, as we said earlier, the symbolism is definitely strong in this, especially if you're steeped in the Eastern religions of that it's referring to. But then two, there is a lot of mirroring that goes on in this film. A lot. And they do a lot of contrasting of this is what was and or this versus this kind of situation. And they really like throw it in your face by the end of the film, but especially at the beginning you even have these in the more subtle ways of how the parents versus the child are interacting. I am curious, based on how you're talking, or at least when you first watched this film, did you dislike Chihiro as a character?
Oh yeah, couldn't stand her. To this day, I can't stand her until after until the big bath with the water spirit.
Okay, yeah.
Like introduction of Big Stinky is like the moment that Chihiro starts to change for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good scene. Yeah, because she's so I didn't find her annoying, but I have multiple times, even on this podcast, found characters so annoying that I couldn't stand them, but then ended up appreciating them later. So I love to see that, and someone else is in my shoes.
Dude, that's also how I felt about the big baby.
Oh my gosh, yes.
The big baby in every scene that you see in it, and this is intentional, but every scene that you see it in is like, I can't stand you. I've never wanted to kill a child before, and you make me want to kill an infant. Like, infanticide is bad.
Yeah.
I want, like, you're the exception. And then it turns, and then one of the key characters in this thing turns the big baby into this little mouse, and it becomes like one of the funniest, coolest, cutest little characters. And I'm just like, yeah, you go, little mouse dude. Yeah. It's so stupid.
Yep.
Which brings me to like, if we're going to talk about like the most endearing moment with the little mouse, besides like being in the train window and like being excited that it gets to go on a trip,
right?
Which is indicative of its own thing, is like it's spent its entire life as this protected child, and then it gets transformed into an animal, but that's the moment that it actually gets to start to live. Analyze that to the nth degree for me. And then you go into this moment where right before that, they go back to see Kamachi before they go on this train journey.
And for you as the audience, this is like pretty far ahead in the film, but yeah, keep going.
Yeah, latter 2/3. And in this moment, Chihiro's just saved the water spirit's life, Haku, right? So she's just saved the life of the boy that saved her. She saves him, right? So mirroring parallels in that narratively. Right before she goes on this first journey, not as an adult yet, but like having enough self-agency to be able to go out and not have to have someone look after her. She's starting to become her own person, specifically to try and save this guy. And kills the parasite that's inside of him. there is a premise, or there is a technique in storytelling that I only know the person that coined the phrase. I want to say it's, this is going to bother me now. All right, I'm not going to attribute to who I know it from because I can't figure out exactly who I know it from, and the two people that I know it from don't like each other.
Okay, all right.
I know actively that they don't like each other. So if I attribute to one and it's the other, I'm going to get griped at online by somebody. So anyway, it's called Pope in a Pool. And the premise comes from this, or the core concept of this comes from, if you have a character that needs to basically explain the plot because you don't have enough time to say to show everything in the script, and so you have to cover some ground in dialogue that would be overly on the nose, put the Pope in a pool and let him swim. Right? Distract the audience with something. So,
yes.
So the idea in the scene that this comes from is there's a movie, I can't remember which movie, where the Pope is literally swimming while these two bishops are standing on the side of the pool and basically mansplaining the plot to the audience. And no one cares because they're too focused on the Pope swimming in the pool because that's weird, right? And so in this, you see this scene where Chihiro gets this demon that gets this parasite out of Haku. She chases it around for a little bit, stomps it under her foot, and then Kamachi says, like, make a circle, and he like cuts it with his hand. And then like seconds later, the little mouse dude and little fly guy go over with the magical soot balls, and they reenact the scene that you just saw in the cutest way possible, while Chihiro and Kamachi mansplain the rest of the plot to you. So they literally use Pope in a Pool in this. So if you ever have a point where you need to explain to your audience what is happening, you can find a way to do that, but also distract your audience with the images so they're paying attention to the story you're telling visually that doesn't matter, while listening to the story that matters, so that they have context in what's happening, and they will they'll understand. Subconsciously, your audience will understand. Your audience is a lot smarter than what you give them credit for. We recognize this. Like, we too are audiences. We recognize this. We're a little bit different because we understand the technique that's being used, but even audiences that don't understand the technique that's being used, right? They might not understand this Pope in the pool idea, are going to pick up on what it is that you're doing. And then, but they'll kind of like eject it out the back of your brain that you did it. Like, they'll appreciate it. They'll understand what's coming next. And then they'll totally forget why they know that. And then they'll go back and watch it 3 or 4 times. And it'll be on like the 4th or 5th time that they've watched your movie or read your book or whatever, that they realize, you told me exactly what you were going, you pulled a Shakespeare. You told me exactly what was going to happen before it happened. And yet I still engaged with it as though I had no idea what was going to happen.
Yep. Dude, I as soon as you started explaining that, I was like, oh, I know exactly where he's going with this. The only thing that came to my mind was, I feel like Marvel could take a note out of that book, because they do that so much, but they don't do the Pope in the pool. They don't have a distraction. They'll just literally sit there on screen and tell you, and you're like, what's the point of watching this?
Except for the first Avengers movie.
Oh, yeah. No. I say anything Avengers earlier, like, is good.
Dude, the first Avengers movie tells you the entire plot of phase 1 or I think up to maybe phase 2 of the entire MCU, right? They're in the helicarrier and they're chatting about stuff and they're cracking jokes, and through the jokes that they're cracking, the writers are telling you everything they're about to do in the next like 8 movies.
Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of silly.
I did not pick up on that. That's actually pretty clever.
And the Pope in the pool in that one, like, what's distracting you is the fact that all of these things are pitched and presented to you as comedic relief, when in reality they're just spoiling the rest of the franchise for you.
Nice.
It's awesome. Fun games that writers like to play. It's like, I'm going to see what I can get away with and how much they're actually going to notice. And then they just, and by doing that, they create this amazing ecosystem for podcasters and YouTubers to make lots of money.
That's hilarious.
And every one of you wants to go back and watch Avengers now to figure out what I'm talking about.
Yep. That's not even a lie for me. Like, I want to go back because I didn't notice it. Yeah, I think Chihiro as the character, kind of bringing it a little bit back. She's obviously the protagonist, right? She's the main character of this story, and she goes through this incredible arc. But she starts off very, like we said, she's very reserved, taken back. She doesn't really want to even be where she's at in the country, let alone in the spirit world, right? And so her being thrust into there, she has some very compelling things that drives her forward into the plot. Do you think that, I guess, what are your thoughts on the main character and how she develops?
What we see is on paper a very short couple of bullets, right? Bullet 1, Chihiro in car says that she's scared of starting at a new school. Parents try to convince her otherwise. That's bullet A. Bullet Z, right, is parents try to identify with daughter that maybe starting in a new school is kind of hard and scary. Chihiro looks at him and says, I think I'll be okay. That's a complete polar shift from beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. And unless you go through this journey through the spirit world, right, where the whole thing is a metaphor to a degree of the spiritual journey that she takes inside of herself to go from one thing to the next. We get to see that manifested in the spirit world. We get to see the internal manifested externally as a literal physical journey through the spirit world that gets her from point A to point Z. On paper, it looks like a polar shift, but you could put those two bullets next to each other and say, yes, this is a good, compelling story. This is not just dynamicism. This isn't just learning. This is a complete 180 from where this character was before. And that, I don't think, if you don't start her off being the annoying coward that she is at the beginning, and I think that that's why she annoys me so much, is because the thing that annoys me is not her immaturity. The thing that annoys me is her cowardice. But by the end of it, she's my favorite. She's awesome. I like her more than the dragon, which is silly.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't find her as annoying, but I definitely see where she has a huge drawback as a character because she's just so reticent to engage with anything that she doesn't want to be anywhere. And so being pushed into this world, you really have to have a strong, compelling reason for her to be there, and they provide those very well. One, they step into the spirit realm, right? She doesn't even know how to get out of the spirit realm. Two, she's in a spot where her parents are now pigs stuck in a pig pen going to be butchered, and she's like, if I'm going to survive this at all, I need to bring them with me. And then she's has this one friend who decides to help her out, and it's Haku, and he says, if you want to even live, you need to go down these stairs, right, talk to the Spider-Man, get a job so that people won't kill you or turn you into a different animal so that they can eat you.
Right.
That's the premise of the story. That's what pushes her forward. And that, for a compelling reason, it's like thing after thing after thing at the start in a kid's movie that makes you go, wow, this is really pushing the envelope here, but she's going to figure it out because she has to. She can't be scared. She has to move forward because there is no other option.
The creators of South Park have a lecture that's gone viral recently, where they're talking to, I want to say it was Penn State, but I could be wrong on that. But they describe a principle, a very simple fail-safe principle of storytelling that says when you look at the outline beats of your story, try to transition between each one of them as though it's a run-on sentence and figure out what you want to use. If it's and then, you've got a problem.
Yep.
The only two that you should be using, and the only reason why you get to use and then is in the beginning, because you might need to jump between a couple of plot lines that haven't been established yet.
Right.
After the first 5 bullets, everything in your script everything in your outline, your beat sheet should be but or therefore. The next beat should be specifically indicative of the one. Maverick emailed Chad. Therefore, Chad replied. Maverick emailed Chad to be on the podcast. Therefore, Chad replied that he wanted to be on the podcast. Right? One immediately implies the other, or it has to be in direct contradiction. Right? That's where the but comes from. So, therefore implies direct linkage. It like this beat does not happen without the one previous. And but implies immediate conflict because it flies in the face of all the progress that's being made. It gives you conflict. If you're using but and therefore, you're fine. If you're using and then, you're running the risk of having a really bland story. Right. Boring. Nobody wants a boring story. And this film specifically, you can run through all of it, right? Chihiro's parents wander into or Chihiro's parents are investigating this tunnel, but Chihiro doesn't want to go with them. Chihiro's parents, another but in contradiction, Chihiro's parents go anyway. Therefore, Chihiro follows. Right?
You have that follow through the entire.
You can take every major, you can take every scene, or you could go beat by beat by beat by beat of this story. And there's probably 180 actual story beats in this of active decisions that are made that somehow transform the overall narrative. And every one of them can obey the but therefore. And that's something that to go into the realm of POV, the entire POV of this, we only once stray from the POV of Chihiro, and that's after she saves Haku and she is on her train journey. We jump to Haku's POV one time.
Right.
The rest of the film is told from Chihiro's perspective. And that perspective is what gives you the ability to have this really consistent, really clean element of but therefore in what Robert McKee would call a multi-plot story, where you're covering several different characters. You have to have this happens, therefore this happens, therefore this happens, but this happens, and then this other character, right? Like that's the only acceptable time is when you're changing POVs, is when you get to use that, and it happens early in a story.
Right.
So
yeah. No, and they do that very well. That was one of the things that I noticed in just the progression of the story, was that this was better than a lot of non-kids films that I've watched, where everything was really pushing the story forward, where, okay, he's talking to the spider guy, right? Going back to that earlier point. And then the spider guy goes, hey, I can't actually give you the job. You have to get permission from higher up, which was Yabuso, I believe her name was.
Yubaba.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So, and she is the owner of the whole bathhouse. And
who is also the one that, like, not 5 or 10 minutes earlier, Haku had said, by the way, don't get spotted by that. They're looking for you. Right. Like if you get found out, they're going to like turn you into an animal and eat you. Right. And then 15 minutes later, Spider Dude, who you don't trust because he's weird looking, says, by the way, you need to go see the person that wants to turn you into an animal and eat you.
Right.
You want to talk about immediate conflict? Don't go here. You must. Right? Like, don't do it.
Choice. Yeah.
But if you want to live, you got to.
Right. And the other thing about this film, which was also just remarkable, is all of this is grounded in the main character, the protagonist, Chihiro's fears, right? She's one who is, her baseline is, I'm afraid of pretty much anything I'm not familiar with. And that's the touch point that we all go from. And because they established that baseline, that's where we move forward from, and that's how we understand all conflict going forward. So it doesn't need to be this, like the Avengers versus Ultron and his cohort, right? You don't need to have this world-shattering conflict of people. You have a baseline of a girl who's just trying to get home. And it's very compelling because you bring all of us into her world, And then from her world, we see a universe that is terrifying to her. And because we've already bought into her world, we also are terrified of it.
I got this from somebody else who's a successful writer in Hollywood by reading their book. But again, I can't remember exactly which one it is.
Sure.
But the advice is any conflict when you're writing, any conflict that's really compelling to us is primal, right? Like if an ape man understands it, it's going to be compelling. This is why, for absolutely no reason, the Godzilla movies, for whatever reason, besides the fact that they're fun to watch big monsters beat each other up and destroy cities, like that only lasts for so long. There's a reason why, since the integration of Kong, or maybe the reason why they had to integrate Kong, is that there is something more believable about the human element of Kong because of our relation to apes, our close biological relation to apes and behavior and stuff, that allows us to see primal human behavior and desire in something that's a big monster that goes around punching lizards in the face, right? You see this same element of primal desire, primal need. And I don't actually ascribe much to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Per se. I think that there's some of it that has merit, but I do think that human beings are like the one creature that defies it oftentimes, right? Like we see through acts of kindness. For instance, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if I am hungry and you are hungry and I come across food, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that I should eat the food to keep myself alive.
Right.
But if I care enough about you as a friend, I might sacrifice my own need for the spiritual need that I have to be filled by understanding that I provided for a friend.
Yeah.
We are the only, at least in large quantities, right? Like in you see it happen a little bit in the animal kingdom, but not much. And usually when it happens in the animal kingdom, it only happens between parental figures and children. So you'll sometimes see a parental element sacrifice for a child, but it's not often. It's the exception to the rule. Versus with human nature, you could argue that it's still the exception to the rule. I would argue that it's at least 50-50 without having direct statistics in front of me.
Right.
And so when you go into something that is a primal need, and that primal need can be spiritual fulfillment just as much as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so long as there is something that is primal to that, right? That spiritual fulfillment or physical need, or the desire to stay alive, the desire to procreate, the desire to have children, the desire to raise children, the desire to protect children, the baseline understanding of right and wrong, good and evil. These things all encompass this hierarchy. And I think it's when you find something that is primal at its core, just in the same way that Chihiro has this primal nature to make it home, right? The desire for home, that primal element of not just survival, but family lineage, and the desire to make it home. You're willing to do whatever it takes to get there. And what it takes is for her to discover courage.
Yeah, I think her character is really interesting. And part of what I was maybe just a little confused about in regards to the plot, which the plot meanders a bit. So, you kind of go up and down this little journey as she figures out how to interact with different characters in the spirit realm. And one of the maybe things that was more interesting to me is she's so focused on getting home and getting to her parents. And then at one point she flips to this almost switch of courage where she goes, I need to help this person who's my friend Haku, and really focuses on that for a portion of the film near the end, where she's trying to save him rather than really escape from the area. And that ends up working out because Haku goes to help her. But maybe what are your thoughts on that interaction between those two characters, especially Haku as a character?
So in that realm, I think that here's a creature that has saved her life.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, dragon, spirit, whatever you want to call him, that has saved her life. And she is spiritually mature enough to understand what that means, that he risked himself for her, not once, but twice.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that she has her opportunity to fight back for him is also the moment after she has gotten her first big victory. She was set up for failure. And instead of letting it destroy her, she rose to the challenge, not because she's some big hero, but just because she tried to figure out what's the next thing that I need to do? What's the next simplest step that I can take to move to the next thing? And so she's thrust into this. This is right after the stink monster, right?
Right.
Giving Big Stinky a bath. And so she's put in this situation where her and her mentor go into this bath and they're like, okay, we have to clean this. And her mentor shows her the ropes and be like, okay, this is how this works. You're going to open up this thing. You're going to put this thing. You're going to send it down to the other guy that we like, because we've found out that he's not big scary, but he actually knows what he's talking about. And he's looking out for us.
Yeah.
And then you're going to pull on this, and it's going to give you some water, and you're going to be all right. Cool.
Right.
Cool. I'm going to go get something. And so she leaves, and then Big Stinky comes around, and they're like, everybody leave. Right? And like, I'm going to go get us breakfast. We're good now. And then all hell breaks loose, and she's on her own, and she rises to the challenge. Right? She was just taught how to do something. She redoes that, right? Like, when's the last time you showed up to a job and your boss is like, here, I'm going to train you on how to do this. Go to the computer. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. You're going to do this. And then they leave you on your own for the first time. Like, how often can you rise to the challenge? So that's an impressive thing, even though the task itself is simple.
Right.
Open door, put in card, turn on water. 3 steps.
Right.
Complicated by the fact that you have something that is so putrid it makes you want to vomit.
Yeah.
And everyone's looking like, hey, look at the human. Hey, look at the human. The human's going to die. The human's going to get all stinky. Look at the human suck. Yeah. Are we ever going to actually help the human? No, we're not going to help the human. And then the human's like, wait. She opened the door.
Right.
Where did you get that token?
Right.
What is happening?
Right.
And then one of our main antagonists, Yubaba, actually manages, or our main antagonist, Yubaba, realizes there's something different here. And so for the sake of her business and her wealth, which she values more than her control and her antagonism over Chihiro, everyone becomes friends in this one moment, which is an interesting twist, right? Like, this is a really good conflict moment where you have value-based characters, right? You want to make this a character-driven story. You have value-based characters where Yubaba values money and the success of her business more than she likes the antagonistic principle of picking on this human that she would really like to just turn into an animal and eat.
Right.
And so in this moment, these two characters, their desires align. Chihiro wants to survive this thing and get this guy, and then she starts to realize, oh, there's something else going on here around the same time that Yubaba does. And so they both align. They come from polar different places. Money, survival, to we need to help this thing. Regardless of what the actual motivating factor is for either of them, the task at hand, the simple truth, right? When you boil it down, what do these characters want? They want to help this spirit take a bath. And that becomes quintessential to the rest of the plot, right? Like, this is a huge pivoting moment, because if they don't help this character, other things don't happen. Right? Two other major moments do not occur if this river spirit does not get saved. So,
well, and that's almost interesting, because maybe, and this is me just internally reflecting as you're discussing, but one of the key things that you get from this river spirit is they clean off the river spirit, and the river spirit gives almost like a cure to evil spiritual powers or what be that are affecting her or the people that she cares about. And Chihiro, or Sen's, the main character, reaction to this is, oh, I'm going to take this little ball of goop and I'm going to give it to my parents and turn them back into humans, and we're going to escape back to the human realm, right?
Yep.
And as the story progresses, you see that she ends up giving away parts of this magical ball to the people that she wants to help that are in front of her to cure them, and in the process she loses what she needs to escape. And maybe as a thinking about what I had said earlier about a little confused about why she takes the actions that she takes later on, some of it has to do with she has run out of options to save her parents. And so she doesn't have the magical ball anymore. She doesn't have a way to save her parents. So she's doing the next good thing she can before her. And that is to go and help her friend by going to the quote unquote evil sister of her boss and stop and give her back the I think it's a stamp as an atoning act, right?
Which she doesn't get unless she uses the medicine, right? So
Right.
immediately after receiving the medicine and helping the spirit, she sees the entity that saved her life under threat of losing his life.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you're in this point where it's like reverse eye for an eye. You saved me. I am compelled by goodness, by ethics, by morals. I am compelled to save you, right?
Right.
And this is I watched the film when I knew this was coming up. My nieces are in town from Germany, and I watched. One of them is 13, one of them is 8. We watched it together last night, and one of my nieces comments about the film was there's a moment where Kamachi explains to Chihiro's mentor, Sen's mentor. I forget her name, but she's voice acted in the English
Lynn,
dub by the
I
same.
believe.
What?
Is it Lynn? You talking about the
Yeah,
girl?
yeah. It's Lynn,
Okay.
who is voice acted by the same actress who voices Meg from Hercules. Let that sink in. So she's compelled by ethics and morals and conscience, right? Spiritual. Again, another example of spiritual maturity that she needs to save this entity that saved her. There's a bond that they have, and Kamachi talks to Lynn later on. That's where I was going with this. That about how she loves Haku, and my 13-year-old niece was kind of confused by that because she's like, she's 9. Like, how what does she know about love? One, I go back to this, like, let's say that it is romantic love for a second, which most young people identify this with first.
Sure.
If it's romantic love, my argument in favor of that is this is the most spiritually mature 9-year-old that I've ever encountered. And therefore, if this is romantic to some degree, it is romantic non-sexual completely, and full on romantic dedication. I don't think that it's romantic at all. I think that this is what I think. And if I understood Japanese, I would have looked up the Japanese word that Kamachi uses there, because the Japanese, they're not as aggressive as the Chinese, right? The Chinese have like 30 different words for love. The Greeks have 7. I don't know how many the Japanese have, but I know that it's more than one. I think that this is more like agape, right? Agape in Greek is this term for familial friendly love, right? The love thy neighbor principle that Christ talks about in the Bible is this agape love. It is this. It is not. Don't go out and like sleep with all of your neighbors. That's bad, right?
Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah.
That's what that's what the churches that were doing, like that were worshiping Aphrodite. I forget what city they were in. Like that's not his context, right? It's not this romantic love. It's this agape love. It's this familial love. It's this love of provision and sharing and looking out for one another, for raising each other's kids to a degree, of having morals and ethics and engaging with each other in a respectful way. I'm not going to lie to you. You're not going to lie to me. We're going to look out for each other. We're going to make sure that we protect each other's land. We're going to protect each other's people. That's the kind of love that I think is happening here. This boy saved her. She now loves him because he is the reason why she even has a chance.
Yeah.
Otherwise, she would have been dead. And I think that she
Right.
is spiritually mature enough to understand that. And I think that the love that is developed with them is between two, like, boy and girl 9-year-old that spend all of their time together. It's that kind of love, right?
Mhm.
It's that best friend kind of love at an age where you don't really know what romance is. That's
Right.
what I think he's talking about here, and why she's so dedicated.
Mhm.
So whenever you analyze this type of love, right, that love is, going back to our previous conversation, that's that primal directive, that's that primal drive. And so
Mhm.
now we understand. So when she sees, I think that primal love was there beforehand. I think that it was developed specifically, and I think the penultimate moment of that love's development was whenever Haku gave her the enchanted food that would help her recover after all of her from her weakness after seeing her
Mhm.
parents. I think that was like the final, yes, like when she ate and shared tears with Haku,
Mhm.
that was that final moment. And so whenever she sees him about to die, whenever she sees that he's hurt, she wants to protect him naturally. And then whenever she sees the extent of his wounds, she's willing to do anything to get to him. She scales the side of the bathhouse.
Mhm.
She ignores everything else that's going on in the world, even to the extent of potentially being rude to No-Face, which we'll get to in a second, because dear God, there's
Mhm.
a lot to talk about with No-Face. And
Yes,
then
there is.
and then goes up, saves Haku by providing him this medicinal thing that she was hoping to save her parents with, which
Mhm.
then gives her the means potentially to find this other source of power through Yubaba's sister.
Right. Right.
Right.
Well,
So
it's
one thing leads
sure.
to the next thing, leads to the next thing, leads to the next thing.
So you have the antagonist and you have No Face, both very different characters in this story. Whichever one you want to tackle first, I'm very curious on your thoughts.
So I say we save No-Face for last, because that's
Okay. Okay.
kind of like the big kicker. Everyone knows No-Face. Even people that haven't
Uh huh.
seen Spirited Away know No-Face.
Uh huh.
I don't think that they know No-Face the way that those of
Yeah.
us who have seen the movie know No-Face.
Uh
So
huh.
let's talk about greedy witch with a big nose first, and then we'll get to No-Face.
Nice. Nice. For sure.
Well, I'm
So
curious to know what your interpretation of Yubaba is.
so, well, I mean, my first interpretation was that she was a Jewish stereotype, but beyond that, uh, be, beyond that, beyond
Yikes!
the Japanese going that route, I was like, okay, so she's this character who's.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm
Oh, I did think that. It was just like, geez, they are really like putting everything in on this one.
Yeah,
But
man.
the
The gold, oh,
the
yeah,
nose,
that
yeah,
was weird, man. That was real
yeah.
weird.
But yeah, I think she was so. She was a great. What you said earlier, which I thought was significant, is that she's a character who she's uh, she's singularly motivated, right? She has her own motivations that go on. It's not like sometimes you see these characters that are they're built as the antagonist to the protagonist, and that's pretty much their sole purpose. And in some ways, they become stock, where you have, oh, the good guy does this thing, the bad guy goes against them. The good guy does this thing, the bad guy goes against them. And in this story, you have more of a situation where she's motivated by money, right? She's motivated by her own gain. And so when things happen, normally she would go against the protagonist, but in this case she won't, because she gets generously benefited by the situation at hand. So I appreciated that she was more nuanced, right? She had her child, which was her own thing. I think she's pretty good. I don't have problems with her. I think that what was more intriguing to me was the test at the end felt a little convoluted, especially that why did Haku just agree to it, even though he clearly was in a power position there. But whatever. I mean, it's a kids' movie. I'm not going to have huge qualms with that. The
Mhm.
other thing was that I think that the sister, which what was the sister's name? I know I wrote it down somewhere, but Zaniba. So the Yubaba Zaniba comparison was very interesting because clearly they're supposed to be contrasts of each other, right?
Right.
One is one type, the other is completely different. And Yubaba is this greedy kind of witch character, right, from some sort of Brothers Grimm story. And then you have Zaniba, who's painted as that, but then when you come into contact with her, she's actually super nice. She's basically the loving grandma that you have tea with and all that kind of stuff. And it was good. It was a good contrast, and I appreciated it for that. I do think that Zaniba, from that point forward, really takes any conflict out of the sails, and it kind of starts to get flat. But you could argue at that point that the story's pretty much over, and that you're in the denouement. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that whole thing, but that's where my mind's at.
I agree with you. What it feels like more is the spirit world itself is the antagonist, not any specific character. That's my perspective. So
Okay.
everything in this world is aligned against this girl who doesn't understand it. Especially because there are so many specific manifestations of fear, right? Look at every single challenge that she faces. It is most of the challenges that young girls look at. Her first fear is a fear of unknown places and uncomfortable things, right? Her second fear that she faces is a fear of heights, which she overcomes at the beginning out of necessity, because she almost like when things are safe, because she has these steps, she's terrified. And then whenever it comes time to save the life of Haku, she braves like a literal parkour climb, and does so with complete courage. Then she faces spiders. Right, literal spider dude, and comes to love Kamachi. Right, comes to look at him as kind of like a grandpa uncle guy. Then you see the reflection of the stink and the dirt and the grime, right? Well, there's a lot of girls that are scared to get dirty and scared to get gross and scared to get nasty. And she is too, to a degree. She's like really adverse to this at first. And then she just kind of sucks it up and says like, all right, screw it. I'm going to get it done. And that's a huge pivotal moment. Like that really is the moment where she does that is her big character pivot, where she's like, okay, I've faced enough things now. I'm sick of this. I'm in a position where if I don't do this, I'm literally going to die. And there's another creature here that is relying on me to be competent. Doesn't matter if I just learned, I have to get it done. And whenever that happens, that's kind of like the final straw that weighs the scales, right? It doesn't break the camel's back. It actually weighs the scales and brings her into equilibrium, where I don't think that she is absent of fear, but she has the courage to face it.
Right.
And then what happens with No-Face is, and this is kind of a good segue into this, like her facing off against Yubaba also places young girl against an old person, right?
Sure.
To a degree, right? You have almost like a Hansel and Gretel kind of moment. And so then whenever
100%.
she goes to face Zaniba, she's not scared. She goes willingly, right? So she's very reluctant to go see Yubaba. And whenever she goes to see Yubaba's mirror, her literal counterpart, she could have been scared. And she wasn't. She went after it. And there was nothing to be scared about, even though Zaniba probably gave her more reason to be scared than Yubaba did, because Zaniba, out of all the characters in the story, does the most literal physical damage to anyone in the story. She almost kills Haku. She transforms her sister's baby, her nephew, take of that, her spirit nephew, whatever, into a mouse, right? Like this is not someone that you kind of you want to trifle with exactly. And yet she's faced with almost zero issue. And even in the face of going to face the horror of her parents being transformed, right? And this final test that she's given is once again a reflection of the fear of uncertainty. And she has enough spiritual maturity at this point to recognize not that, and that's probably one of the best um, double plot twists. Like immediately,
Okay.
boom, boom, like a single reveal for two plot twists is not just that the the main antagonist was lying. Okay, like that, like that's a plot twist, right? Because
Sure.
the task itself was already impossible. How are you going to identify your parents that look like pigs from a bunch of other
Right.
pigs?
Right. Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
haven't been trained on identifying pigs. So first of all, the task is impossible. And then you say, oh, well, you're lying to me anyway because they're not here at all. Plot twist.
Mhm.
And the fact that you had this spiritual maturity, because that's the only thing that you can like there's no indicator that can give you that. The only way that you know that is a gut feeling. And that's what I consider to be spiritual maturity. Regardless of faith or religion or anything like that. Your spiritual maturity is what gives you that. The fact that this 9-year-old girl, 10-year-old girl is able to show that level of spiritual maturity in the spirit realm, right? After having gone through this journey in
Right.
the spirit realm is indicative of that. And then she returns home and is faced with the next challenge, which is like, oh, you got to go to a new school. You got to go live in a new space. You got to, it's like, oh, I think I can handle it. Right. Again.
Mhm.
So I think it's the environment
Yeah.
that is the antagonistic element against her. And you see all of these fears presented and her facing them without courage and then facing them all in mirror with courage
Mm.
eventually.
Yeah.
That's number one. So when it comes to Yubaba, I think that she is a quintessential and excellent part of the world, but I don't actually consider her to be the main antagonist.
Hmm. Yeah.
If
Well, that's
anything,
interesting, even to compare like to the end, because there's a certain sense in which even going on that arc of spiritual maturity, right? She starts out where she's scared of all of the spirits, and the spirits in some ways when they identify her are coming after her, right? And then by the end, she's grown so much in her maturity that the other spirits have recognized that and almost are rooting for her. So
mhm,
the only one who's really in her way is Yubaba, and the rest of them are ready to see her excel and succeed and leave in grace and in accolades for the growth that she's seen and the great things that she's doing for herself and for the people around her.
right.
And so it's not just reflected. There's a certain sense in which the antagonist of the story doesn't just reflect the struggles that she's going through and force her to grow through those, but also then reflects that growth as well and how they react and interact with her.
No, yeah, I think that that's absolutely correct. And um, for whatever reason, the big reveal that Haku and her have known each other for much longer whenever she almost drowned as a kid and blah blah blah, like that didn't actually punch all that hard for me.
I
I
didn't think so either.
like
No.
it was like, okay, like cool, so there's more that ties you together than what you've had. But you, like, if that part of this story was missing, if you cut that reveal,
Hmm.
I don't particularly think that you lose anything from this story, because this story is
Yeah.
not about this girl and Haku, which is where
Hmm.
whenever I was younger, I got this very, very wrong. I thought that this was a story about this girl and this dragon boy. And
Hmm.
that's like the trailer thing that's supposed to get you in the door to experience this grander coming of age story. Um,
Yeah. No, I call those fun fact revelations. It's just like, oh, it's a fun fact, but it just has no material
Actual
impact on
bearing.
the plot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm usually not one for sequels, but I actually think that this is one film that would have really benefited from a sequel after having this big harrowing journey of this young girl, having her being 13, 14, 15, and
Hmm.
potentially dealing with problems not of courage but of acceptance, to sort of get
Hmm.
her to like want to go back, and then facing a completely different challenge in this already really beautifully crafted and well developed world, I think is a missed opportunity. We might still get it. Miyazaki has come out of retirement consistently. He's like the boy in the heron is my last one, and now he's developing another one. Thank God, because like I don't, you don't want to end on the boy in the heron.
I mean, okay, so No-Face. I'm really curious on your thoughts, especially with you having a little more reference for the Shinto references that they have in this film than I do. But you could definitely tell that there was a broader context for this type of character in the spiritual understanding of Japanese culture, right? Just because he's almost a mysterious being that exists there for a good portion, and she continuously sees him, but he doesn't interact a ton. He's kind of just following her.
Right.
And then he gets into the bathhouse, and that's where he really starts to wreak havoc. And I got the impression, maybe just giving a broad brushstroke of him as a character, right? He's this black mass form with the white mask, but the white mask with the mouth isn't actually his mouth. He's got a literal mouth that comes out of his, neck area that then proceeds to eat people and proceeds to eat all the food in the area. And there's my general interpretation of him was that he was supposed to represent this almost toxic type of friendship going along the lines of the other relationships in the story that exists, where he continuously takes until he consumes the people around him and everything around him until he actually comes to a healthy relationship. But that might be over analyzing the themes or the representation of No-Face, but I thought he was interesting.
I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to take what you said because you're absolutely correct, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit for you.
Okay. Yeah.
As I discussed before, and my wife gets partial credit for helping me come to this revelation. As I mentioned before, everything that takes time in this is a representation of a fear that a young girl typically has, right?
Right.
The fear of heights whenever she has to go down the steps, the fear of spiders, the fear of the old lady, especially the powerful old lady that can like turn you and eat you and whatever.
Right.
Rhetorical question that I'll let the audience think on is like, if you've seen the movie, what fear do you think that No-Face actually is, especially when you consider its characteristics of it can consume you, it can consume everything around you. It is when you not even like impolitely, when you politely reject its attempts at kindness, it takes a personal affront to it. And then you have colloquially, this one I do know, the term that is used in Japanese when they say monster in English, whenever you're watching the English dub, like you let a monster in, you let a monster in, is not oni, but it is similar, right? It is a type of underworld being, quasi demon, right? So Eastern religions have a different understanding of the underworld and of demons overall than what we do in the West. For them, demons are not fallen angels. These are beings that exist in the underworld and have very specific jobs in the underworld. And the underworld, though it is a dark place and has evil come from it, is not in and of itself evil, if that makes sense. And so this being is a representation, and the underworld is a representation of many things that can consume you in a negative fashion. No-Face is the embodiment of loneliness.
Okay, yeah, I could see that.
It is the embodiment of Chihiro's fear of being alone. It manifests itself for the first time whenever she starts to lose her parents. And the whole time that she is faced with this feeling of loneliness is whenever she is doing this. And then whenever she has finally overcome her desire, her feeling of loneliness, right? She saved Haku. She goes on the train. She talked to Zabita, and Haku is no longer under threat. So she knows that she has at least one friend in this world for the rest of her life. Even if she's trapped here forever and can never get her parents out, she has at least one friend. Where does No-Face stay? With Zabita.
Yeah. Well,
she's no longer alone. She's no longer afraid of being alone. And loneliness is manifested in everything. You think that if you give everything that you have, if you think that if you manifest gold, you think that wealth is going to solve your loneliness. You think that kindness in and of itself can solve your loneliness. But whenever that kindness is rejected because you offer it to the wrong person or in the wrong way, it changes you. And your overt desire to try and make something of yourself to solve your loneliness allows you to even start to consume people and relationships in your life.
Yeah.
That's what No-Face is.
Yeah.
That's my breakdown of that.
No, and as you said that, I realized that makes a lot of sense, even in like the very small things, right? Where Chihiro goes to meet Haku at the bridge, and when she first crosses the bridge, No-Face is there looking at her, and she's kind of unnerved by that. She goes across the bridge, she doesn't see Haku, she looks back, No-Face is still there, looks back to where Haku should be, Haku's there. And then she looks back at the bridge, No-Face is gone. So even in like the very small things, it's like, okay, now she's not feeling lonely, or it's not in the lonely aspect. They even play it out in the small things. So very great touch by Studio Ghibli.
And her first fear, right, that she expresses is when she's holding the flowers and the going away card from her friend. She's going to a new place. The very first thing that she fears when we first meet her, when the lights come up, or when the camera, when the lights go down and the camera's on, I should say, the very first fear that we're introduced to from Chihiro is that she's afraid of being alone. Starting school in a new place is afraid of being alone. So the biggest antagonistic force, the scariest thing in this entire piece is not the witch that claims your name. It's not the spider guy that ends up being your friend. It's not the stinky spirit that ends up being the thing that helps you out. It's not Yubaba that actually ends up figuring out a way to be benevolent and to some weird degree at the end by keeping your parents alive and having not eaten them already in the 2 days. Like, it's like, realistically, like, she should have said, like, yeah, we're going to keep her here. We're like if you want to go full on Brothers Grimm, like, she gets to the end, it's like, wait, my parents aren't here. It's like, oh yeah, we ate them 2 days ago when you first showed up.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it does take some little element of benevolence, right? A little bit of element of plot armor for the parents to even still be alive. So, but out of all of those things, the one that creeps us out the most is this anthropomorphic, all-consuming, oddly generous, manipulative, volatile force. And that is what No-Face is, what we become if we give into that element of loneliness and allow it to develop into that narcissism, and it can just destroy everything inside of you. It's the monster without a face. It is the demon from the underworld.
Yeah.
In a realm of spirits, right? Why is there only one that they talk? And all of these spirits have their flaws. All of these spirits, like, they don't view greed in a negative sense per se. That's just an existence of a spirit. Like, that's Yubaba. They don't. The river spirit that ends up being the stink monster, or the stink monster that ends up being the river spirit or whatever, is just a corrupted, polluted form of something that's pure, right? Which goes into a sort of a planet-saving narrative. You have all of these different things. Even the aloof, jerk, sociopathic nature that Haku is at certain times in this thing. Like, no one, all of the personified spirits have their own flaws that are bad. So then why is this seemingly kind and benevolent thing so bad? And it's because it's what it can do to us.
Right. Yeah. Yes, that's really interesting. And it's probably, like you said early on, one of the most iconic pieces of the story, because everyone even sees the posters and they go, oh, the little kid and the creepy black monster with the white mask. I have no idea what it means, but then when you know what it means, that's what you're going to be thinking about going forward with the film. So it's definitely had a huge impact so far. But I think the story is really one that has a poignant message, and one that continues to have value today. What are your thoughts maybe on the message or the story itself, and what it carries with it as we even move forward in culture and in the life of America?
How you choose to face your fears is just as important as facing them. In the beginning of this story,
Yeah.
Chihiro faces every single one of her fears in order to survive.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of it, she is facing them in a way that is tonally different and therefore has a different outcome for it, ultimately.
Yeah.
So that was not only the growth and the necessity of courage is a big thing, and I think that we live in a time we live in very uncertain times. So the advancement of technology at a rate that is it's going insane. We have no idea where we're going with AI. Quantum computing's around the corner. Once quantum picks up, then you're going to talk about biological computing not long after that. No, I'm not a conspiracy theorist on that. If any of your audience wonders, they can Google that one. They have the ability to do read and write capabilities onto strands of DNA, which is
right.
ballistic. That is absolutely insane. It's probably not weird for you being so close to Silicon Valley. Like you're probably used to like people being around talking about all this stuff like it's normal, but like to those of us on the East Coast, like we're still living in the Stone Age over here, man. Like we get everything 3 years late.
Oh gosh.
But
it's hilarious.
So and then especially with election season and the chaos that we're seeing in the country, here in the United States, and then globally, we're living in a year where over half the countries in the world have elections this year. So there's an element of unstableness. I was about to say disableness. It's not a word. Of unstableness in the world itself, and so if there's a period of time that we need to find courage, it's now, right? We live in a time right now. I'll say this: we live in a time right now where we are Chihiro in the car on the way at the beginning of the movie, right? Many of us are like, we don't know what the future looks like, and it looks scary, and we don't want to go through the door. We don't want to step into the spirit realm. We don't want to have to go through it. And I think that the challenges are going to happen regardless. You're going to the new place. It's not a matter of what is happening. It is the matter of how you choose to interact with it. Are you going to face these changes with courage? Are you going to face your own fears with courage and learn to adapt and have a positive outlook and an outlook of abundance and try and figure out ways to love your neighbor and try and figure out ways to provide for your family and try and figure out ways to look at life, like I said, with abundance, the abundant mindset that there's more than enough. There will always be more than enough. And you just have to go and find what is yours. And then when you find it, be generous to others to help them get what's theirs, right? Zig Ziglar has a great quote that says, the fastest way to get what you want in life is to help other people get what they want. You see that reflected in this movie. The reason why Chihiro got her family back, the reason why she was able to make any progress is because she was helping others, whether it be the river spirit, whether it be Haku, whether it be even to some element in some degree Yubaba, or the baby that turns into a mouse that she brings along with her, or No-Face, right? Like it's this heart of servitude and service, which is a form of spiritual maturity that we have to have that I think is quintessential to the lending of courage as well. So that's what I would say is Chihiro is both an example of what to be and what not to be in the same film.
Yeah, exactly. And having that willingness to even, like you said at the beginning, there's not she does what she has to out of necessity, right? And from that she grows. And so it's not so much that you have to be in a situation where you're comfortable stepping forward into it. It is uncomfortable to be courageous. And that's the point, right? Is that you're not prepared to deal with the situation. You deal with it anyways. And especially in tumultuous times, it's where real men and women are made, because they step forward with that understanding and make a difference.
Courage is not being unafraid. Courage is understanding fear and being willing to act in the face of it.
Yeah. Nice. And that's honestly probably one of the best notes we could end it on. So that's the pod. Chad, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you or see more of your content?
So it is. I just changed my X handle, so give me just a second to look that up because I haven't memorized it yet. Give me 1 second. Don't get bored with me. Stop. Don't touch that dial. Most of the people listening to this don't know what a dial is. So on X, I am Chad Garrett FP. No, last time I was Storycraft HQ. It is just my name, FP. You can see my headshot on there. It should be really easy to find me on X. I post motivational things. Nice. I post things about stories. I post things about the film and entertainment industry on there. Lots of cool thoughts there. You can find us on forerunnerproductions.com is where you can find the company blog posts. It's where you can find my personal blog posts. It's where you can find any of the podcasts that we're both still releasing, which is my old man's podcast. My dad does a evangelical podcast where he talks about overcoming addiction. It's called Let's Talk Fortitude. So fortitude in life and faith, and discipleship, as well as business ownership, military service, all kinds of cool stuff like that. He touches on a little bit of everything. And then we are also on YouTube, Forerunner Productions on YouTube. We're going to have a lot more content coming out starting in September on that platform. So the Forerunner Productions is getting into some distribution element stuff. And then we also make feature films. And then if you really like what I have to say and you want to support me and Forerunner Productions and the feature films that we're going to be making in the future, you can go to forerunnerproductions.locals.com. That's our subscription community and everything like that. So I know that's a lot, but if you just go to forerunnerproductions.com or find me on X, that's the two best places. So Chad Garrett FP or forerunnerproductions.com, Forerunner Productions on YouTube. That's the
connection.
Yeah, man.
That's how you find them, guys. And as always, if you want to like and subscribe to us, you can always do that down below. But you're already there, so we're not super worried about that. Yeah. There it is.
Yeah, man.
Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away.
Yeah, we got to do it.
We thank you all for tuning in.
This is two movies in a row that we've done that I like too much. We have to pick a movie that I don't like next time, so that it could just be like an entire episode of just ragging on stuff. Like, what were they doing? What are they thinking? That's gotta that's.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you want to get the full rant phase, you'll have to check out our John Wick episode. That's
oh really?
That we go a little bit off on that one. So
I've seen some of the clapbacks on some of the Star Wars stuff, which I appreciate because I love Star Wars as much as the next guy. But I'm like, what? Like, and the people that I am so sorry. Before as we wrap up, episode 1. The Phantom Menace is the most underrated Star Wars movie ever, okay? The Phantom Menace is awesome. No one can tell me any different. The best one is obviously Empire Strikes Back.
Gosh.
Forever will be Empire Strikes Back. The Phantom Menace is completely underrated.
Yeah, that's so funny. Agree to disagree, but we'll check that out next time on the pod.
This is pod racing. No, I'm sorry. I had to make Maverick have some pain before we jumped off.
Right.
And that's the last time you'll ever see me. Maverick will never have me back on ever again.
No. That's not disqualifying, but we'll see you all next time.